Well, I was waiting for the announcement at an airport or Walmart or wherever. It goes like this. Wearing masks sucks, but we're all going to have to do it for a little while longer. So let's just get through it. Thank you very much. I think most people go like, finally, somebody said it.
Like, it's fine. You know, wearing masks is helpful. It's trying to keep people safe. It's an altruistic goal. But yeah, it's been difficult.
You're listening to the Struck Podcast. I'm Dan Blewett.
I'm Alan Hall.
And here on Struck, we talk about everything aviation, aerospace engineering, and lightning protection. Welcome back to the Struck Aerospace Engineering Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Frontier and Spirit Airlines combining, a USA-wide no-fly list, an interesting F-35 salvage mission that's now underway, some GE Aviation and Boeing news, Airbus engine news, some Eviation Alice news, and lastly, we'll talk about Jaunt and their journey to fly in South America. So, Alan, let's start here with the merger between Frontier and Spirit. These are two obviously really low-fare airliners that, you know, they pride themselves on having a really, really cheap, you know, like $29, $19, but then kind of a la carte all the other stuff. This seems to make sense that there doesn't seem to be much distinction between what the two offer, right? And does the merger kind of make sense to you?
I think it does, just because it consolidates operations and maybe lowers the total cost to operate the combined airline. I think there's a question whether the Federal Trade Commission is going to step in and say no to that merger. It'd be hard to say that they would right now. But those two airlines are, like you said, they're like the low-cost airlines to get around the United States. And there's a lot of domestic travel, not much international travel. So you think the future for domestic travel, sort of 737, Airbus 320 kind of flights, are perfect, right? And you're going to see, at least recent things I've heard, is a lot of people are traveling to Texas and Florida at the moment. So those states are really full of people, and that means people are flying on airplanes. So maybe the timing is right, Dan. I haven't flown Spirit in forever, and Frontier, same thing. I used to fly Frontier a little bit more. It is sort of bare bones flying, though. You're not. I have never gotten pampered on either one of those airlines.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews about it, and of course, it forces you into the additional mental math of, okay, well, all right, so it's $30 for the flight, but you know, I have to pay for a carry-on, I've got to pay for this and that and the other thing, and you start like adding it up, and you're like, is this actually cheaper? A lot of times it is, but sometimes it's not. It's just confusing, is how I find it. But at least this would be nice that you don't have to look for, you know, because Frontier serves some routes and Spirit serves others. I just think it's nice to only have to look in a handful of places to get all the potential, you know, what to price shop effectively. It's exhausting to have to check 9 different airlines to try to figure out what's going to be cheapest from this airport to another.
Right, which is what you're doing right now, right? Even Google Flights seems to be the place where you can find the most, but still, it is. You're right. That process is daunting at times.
So it seems like it'd be good for them to combine their routes and combine their operations, and for consumers to have to just look at one. I don't know if they'll be called Frontier, if they'll be called Spirit, or if they'll be called something else. I guess that's to be determined. I'm not really sure.
There's been discussions both ways. I'm not sure it's been settled yet.
I think Spirit's probably. I don't know. I don't love the branding of either. So maybe they come up with something new and modern, but none of them really speak to me. I don't know, but we'll see what comes of that. I think it'll be a good thing no matter what. So moving on, Delta's CEO has repeatedly called for a no-fly list across all airlines, and he's pinging the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to try to get this done. I know that some of the airlines have said there's an operational issue, that it's just like hard to communicate, which seems like nonsense considering how many complex communications they make between, it's super complex to run an airline, that they couldn't share a list. It seems crazy, but I don't know. What's your take on this? I mean, this seems like a pretty big penalty, but then again, don't act like a psycho on an airplane.
Yeah, I suppose. But the interesting part about this story is that the vast majority, like 75% of the problems they're having of contact between crew and passengers is related to mask wearing. And instead of throwing people in jail, which is what they're threatening to do, or fine them heavily, which is what they are doing, and then never allowing them on an airplane forever, seems like overkill to me. I get like a probationary period, like, okay, you can't fly for a year, but forever? I mean, that's like a death sentence in America. Like if you can't get on an airplane and go somewhere, it means you wouldn't be able to visit your grandkids. You may not be able to visit your elderly parents. That's doesn't feel right either. And if the vast majority of the incidences are drawn into via the mask issue, remove the mask issue. We're at that point where states are starting to open up and remove the mask requirement. I think airlines would do themselves a whole lot of good by pushing the issue with the Biden administration and say, hey, look, we're either going to continue to have fights and bad things happening at airports, or we're going to move on. And it's probably time to move on. And I think Delta standing out and saying we want to punish people for an eternity is bad PR. Don't you? I feel like it's just not the right answer here.
I do think it's a pretty big penalty because people can obviously be remorseful and actually change their behavior. Like you don't mean, but at the same time, you're in control of what you do. So I don't really have that much sympathy for people who are assaulting other people on the plane about a mask. It's like, this is not that big a deal. Like we've all been wearing masks for quite a long time. So, I don't know, back and forth, but I would say, yeah, maybe like a 5-year ban or a 3-year ban. I think people need to have penalties if they realize like I'm never going to fly again if I act insane and assault someone. I mean, maybe that takes it back a notch for a couple of people.
The fines they're handing out are tens of thousands of dollars in cases. It's not a small amount of money, right? Because in theory, you're putting the airplane in jeopardy. You rush the cockpit door or something like that, and then, obviously the consequences should get much higher. Causing a dispute in the aisle, it's not good either if you're on the ground. I just feel like they have a mechanism to deal with it, but also they're kind of creating the situation and helping diffuse it. Probably one, limiting alcohol, which before the flight would be helpful in a lot of places like Vegas, and starting to reduce the mask requirements, I think would be a big help.
Yeah, I just don't like the idea of, blaming it on alcohol, blaming it on masks. Because ultimately people are in control of themselves. But I think you're right. The goal is just to solve this issue of flight attendant abuse in general. I think there needs to be a distinction between unruly behavior and like assault.
Right.
If this is a forever no-fly list, there needs to be some sort of tiered system and some sort of appeals process. I mean, there's like, I'll give you an example, there's like dating apps that people will talk about getting kicked off of, and they get no reason, no explanation. They can just like never use that dating app again. There's like no appeals process, which is not a big deal, right? But at the same time, people are like, what did I do? Like, they're like, I didn't do anything. And they just like no one to appeal it to or ever get back on. And you wouldn't want to see something like that. That's completely unimportant, but this is something that's important, where it's like, well, so I mouthed off to someone and now I can never fly on any airplane again. It's like, that seems, like they'd have to be really judicial about it and fair about it.
I think so.
Yeah, because you're right. Like someone could be drunk coming back from Las Vegas and they get a little mouthy and it's not the biggest deal. Like, yeah, you acted like an idiot. Everyone's mad at you. But does that get you banned for the rest of your life from air travel? Like, I don't think so. But then a lot of this stuff absolutely should. You touch someone else, you hurt someone else, you rush the cockpit. So maybe they don't want to get in that whole thing where it becomes a really complicated issue of like trying to ban everyone.
Well, I guess the question that occurred to me early today when I saw this article was, how many people are repeat offenders? Like if you do it twice or 3 times, 3 strikes you're out kind of thing on an airplane. Oh, okay. But I don't think that's what's happening here. I think what they are intending to make is draconian rules that they're going to show in the safety promo. If you touch a flight attendant, you're never going to fly again kind of thing. I don't know if that evokes the right response out of passengers. I think for a select percentage of people on that airplane, it evokes a response of "screw you, try it." Right? I'll give it up. Right? Especially if I've had a couple of cocktails before I got on the airplane because I'm a little afraid of flying. Your inhibitions are removed by doing that. I think it may prompt more problems than it's worth. And if you ever, when the FAA first came out with this no messing around policy with masks, it was like this. I was going through airports at the time, and they have the FAA spokesman up on these screens. It was sort of Orwellian in a sense, like, do not mess with the state. We are going to control you. Like, this is the wrong impression. You could have done this 100 different ways, and you could have talked to someone who has some idea about persuasion, and they would have never advised you to do that because it just feels wrong, and then it just builds on itself, right? So if that wasn't draconian enough, then we're just going to ramp it up, and it doesn't make that poor part of the population want to do what you want them to do. It's just sort of backward logic, I think.
I think a lot of the mask issues have been handled in a way that just like doesn't show a whole lot of emotional intelligence or just like appeal to reason of like, I'll give you an example. I was in a museum recently, and lovely museum here in the District of Columbia. And every like 15 minutes for the 3 hours we were there, this huge, like, stop everything you're doing announcement comes over the PA system of the entire gigantic museum telling you that you have to wear a mask. It's like, we get it. We've been doing this for 2 years. Like, we get it. You don't have to do that. Like, no, and the people that aren't wearing it aren't going to comply because of that. Like, that's not doing anything. It's just annoying everybody. Like, we get it. It's just like stuff like that. It's like, who makes those decisions? I don't know. But you're right. It's like, at the end of the day, I think hopefully we can just put this behind us. I don't know what to do. We just need to put it behind us.
Right. I hope so. Yeah. I would love to hear. Well, I was waiting for the announcement at an airport or Walmart or wherever. It goes like this: wearing masks sucks, but we're all going to have to do it for a little while longer. So let's just get through it. Thank you very much. I think most people go like, finally, somebody said it.
Like, it's fine. Wearing masks is helpful. It's trying to keep people safe. It's an altruistic goal. But yeah, it's been difficult. So moving on, interesting salvage mission is now underway. So the U.S. Navy, Alan, I'm sure you saw this video. I guess it was leaked from the USS Vinson aircraft carrier that this F-35 crash had like a bouncy landing. Looks like a little piece of maybe its wing broke off, and then it fell in the ocean. Luckily, the pilot ejected. But now they're talking about, hey, we got to go get this. And apparently the South China Sea is not that deep, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And the U.S. has salvaged, planes and all sorts of things before. But they're just trying to make sure that no one else gets their hands on this. And that's, I guess, a pretty big concern.
Sure. When they had the F-117 crash over in Croatia or Serbia back in the war in the 1990s, that was a big deal, right? You lose this sort of stealthy asset, and I think the Russians grabbed hold of it. So it is a big deal. The video, whoever released that video is going to get prosecuted. I think that's going to happen. Like, where did that come from, and how did that get out? The video is a little shocking. It isn't like we haven't seen this kind of landing happen before, where the airplane clips the back end of the ship and then goes sliding across the deck. From video from World War II all the way up to today. And so what the video shows is the back end of the airplane kind of clips the deck and goes sliding and burning across the runway area of the deck, and then flips off the front of the carrier. And I guess there are 5 or 6 people that were hurt in that accident. No one died, thank goodness. But the reaction, everybody was pretty swift. If you actually watch that video, you can see the ship turning on its fire suppression systems, and everybody basically goes to stations. So they were ready for it. But the follow up and all the accident investigation is going to take some time as to what happened, right? And did they have a problem in the airplane? The engine quit. Something funky happened. It stalled. that's going to take a while to suss that out.
So you think this person who released that video is going to suffer some consequences, huh?
Yeah, because the Navy is very, I guess rightly so, right? You don't want to show problems because it just doesn't look good on the Navy, and you're not allowed to do that. The Navy doesn't say, hey, you can just disseminate information without having authorization. That's not how it works. It's one of the, any of the services would come down heavily on that. So I'm not sure how it even got out. I think there will be a naval investigation to figure that one out for sure. Now, they'll hopefully not spend as much time on that as in figuring out what's going on with the airplane and what happened on that particular approach to the ship. Like what was the disconnect there and what caused that accident? Because it could have been a lot worse than it was. It was bad enough, but if there are multiple scenarios where people could have died in that. So they're very, very fortunate, actually.
Yeah, it looked like a control room video for sure. Like it was like a very weird low res. Like it looked like some sort of sophisticated equipment. Yeah, definitely not intended for public consumption.
No.
So moving on, Airbus has announced that they might make their own engines for future hydrogen fueled planes. Alan, this seems out of the ordinary. Typically, these big airliners or these airline manufacturers, they want to outsource this and have, the specialists like Rolls Royce and GE to take care of this kind of stuff. Why do they feel like they can do this themselves?
I don't know. Isn't that just the weirdest thing? When Airbus said that, I just had to take a step back and go, what? Why? Why? I mean, from just a variety of reasons: financial reasons, development reasons, staffing reasons, equipment reasons, tooling reasons, not knowing anything about electric motors reasons. It seems like that's something that the airframers had stayed away from historically. But I think there's probably a lot of cash in electric motors for aircraft. If you want to go find the holy grail, right, the thing that costs the most expensive component in an aircraft is the engine, and the service contracts that come with it. So that there is an incentive to kind of enter that marketplace. And since we're basically starting over, clean sheet again, maybe Airbus thinks, well, I just created a vision. I have put a bunch of engineers over there, and I say, okay, make me a hydrogen fuel cell electric motor combo, and we don't have to deal with Rolls Royce or GE or anybody else again. Pratt Whitney, we just do our own thing. And that, I guess that kind of makes sense, but the orders, the orders at Airbus has so many orders right now for airplanes that they can't really possibly meet. Moving into another hugely expensive portion of the airplane development doesn't make a lot of sense today, but maybe it does. It's just shocking. Way out of left field on this one.
Apple finally, the past couple of years in secret started making their own silicon chips and, to displace Intel. And I don't know how much money that saves them, but I'm sure it's a pretty big amount, right? Not to mention their M1 chips are spectacular. I mean, they've really changed what Apple laptops can do. I'm recording this podcast on one, and it's honestly remarkable. So maybe, like you said, if this is a whole change where we got to rethink the engine, essentially, maybe that's a good time to do it and see how, and if they bet $100 million, just throwing a random number out there, if they bet that on, can we do it? Maybe losing that amount of money if they fail isn't the end of the world. Apple also did the same thing. They tried to grow their own Sapphire for the front glass of their phones to make it stronger so they could cut out Gorilla Glass or any of these other ones. That spectacularly failed. I mean, they ate like $5 billion in that failure of that factory, but it didn't end up being really a more than a drop in the bucket over time.
Well, you'd think that making an electric motor hydrogen fuel cell combo is going to be $1 billion try, or maybe two, maybe more. By the time you get to production of something, it's going to be close to that. And certified, it's going to be really close to that. It's going to be an expensive adventure. I mean, everybody's complaining about Boeing investing in Whisk at $500 million. Well, multiply that times 2 or 4, and let's try it again and see how many investor complaints you're going to have. I think you're going to have a lot. It's just not in their wheelhouse, not their strength, and hasn't been.
Well, and speaking of engines, GE Aviation and Boeing have been joining forces, looking at, I guess, hybrid electric propulsion systems, and they're testing it on a Saab 340B aircraft. Alan, what's notable about this? Obviously, there's a lot of information about electric hybrids, all sorts of stuff in the news cycle. But what sticks out to you about this partnership?
The Saab 340 is a twin-engine turboprop airplane, so it's sort of easily modifiable, and there's a lot of them around. So it'd be an easy modifiable platform to evaluate a fuel cell or hydrogen-powered or electric-powered aircraft. So you got two engines. You make one electric, one Jet A, and evaluate it. This is, again, it gets back into why is Boeing in the middle of this? I understand why GE's in the middle of it, but why is Boeing in the middle of it? And what advantage is it for Boeing to be involved in that up front? Because Boeing doesn't make little turboprop airplanes, right? They're making 737s to 777s. Those are big GE 9X kind of power plants, right? The electric motor right now is not going to replace those, at least in its early stages. I don't know how they would do that. And maybe this is where Airbus is chiming in because they heard that Boeing's doing it. So they said, well, maybe we'll do it too. All right, Boeing, yeah, try us, right? But there is a long stage of development. It has to happen here. And you see it on all these electric airplanes that are going around now that are all Part 23, small aircraft, which is where it should be developed, right? Start small and work your way up to the larger airframes. But from a business standpoint, maybe Boeing is hedging its bets and saying, hey, look, maybe the Europeans are going to be really serious about this, and we're going to have to create these quote unquote green airplanes. What does that look like? And how do we prepare for it? Because if we get to 2030 or whatever the magic year is, and we don't have an offering, then we're dead. We're in big trouble. So maybe from that particular aspect alone, legislation is driving this decision by Boeing to work with GE and to get over the hurdle. GE has made electric motors for forever, right? Since the early 1900s, late 1800s. So they know what they're doing there, you would think. And they have all the engineers to do it. Boeing doesn't have the engineers to do all that. So the partnership makes sense, but I'm not sure where this is going. Dan, can you imagine flying on an electric 737? That's not something I can see in 10 years.
Yeah, based on what I've heard from you and others about energy density, it doesn't seem realistic.
Right. So unless we're flying 19 passenger airplanes around, I don't think you're putting 120 people on an electric airplane anytime soon. And going the speed you're going now, no, that's not going to happen. But maybe it's just a reckoning of a lot of flights are shorter flights. There's not a lot of cross-country flights. A lot of flights are like San Francisco to L.A. or whatever they are, and New York to North Carolina. Maybe they can't be handled by smaller airplanes, and I mean, that's the way the world's going to go. But I would say that's not an efficient way of doing it. We're going to find out.
Yeah, well, speaking of electric, let's move on to our EVTOL segment. So first topic is not an EVTOL, but rather just an electric. So the Eviation Alice is apparently close to its first maiden flight. It's currently undergoing high-speed taxi tests at Arlington Municipal Airport, which is near Seattle. And of course, the Alice is an electric. It's got two pusher turboprops. Alan, I mean, this looks like it's getting close finally. We've talked about it for the 2 years that we've been doing this podcast. And they're saying it's not a proof of concept or demonstrator. Like, this is the real deal. And it's a 9-seater, I think. So are we going to see this in action soon?
I think so. The first flight they were trying to get the first flight before the end of the year. And that's always the goal, to get there by the end of the year. Usually there's investments tied to that. And then if January came and went, and now we're in February, and the still first flight is yet to happen. Not a lot of details coming out from Eviation of what the holdup is or what they're evaluating at the moment. My guess is something power plant related. Who knows? Could be avionics too, flight controls. I mean, there's a lot of things that you want to evaluate before you get off the ground, make sure they're working right. The thing about Eviation, and it's a basic aircraft, standard aircraft design, has got wings, fuselage, tail, and instead of having sort of turbofan engines on the fuselage behind the wing, they put electric motors back there with propellers on them. So it has a more conventional design. The uniqueness of it is obviously it doesn't have to carry fuel in the wing, so the wings are very thin, and the lift to drag on those wings is going to be really, really good. Just like Bio Aerospace has been talking about, they don't have fuel in the wings either. So the lift to drag on those things are amazing because you can really design a very efficient wing. But Eviation has customers. DHL is going to buy a bunch of airplanes for cargo. Cape Air, which is out my neck of the woods, is going to use them to shuttle to Martha's Vineyard, sort of Boston to Martha's Vineyard sort of thing, or Nantucket. So it's going to replace some of the twin-engine airplanes they have there. So it does have direct application immediately. It isn't like that market has to develop like Joby's does and a bunch of others. They have an immediate marketplace for it, and it's a conventional aircraft, so it's going to be a little easier to certify. And because of the new Part 23 rules that came out in 2017 and the ASTM means of compliance that are happening now, it's going to be a little bit easier for them to get the Alice certified. And that's the real kicker here, is if they can get an aircraft efficiently through certification, through flight tests, they're going to win. I think they're really going to have a really good product on the marketplace, which will have immediate impact.
Yeah, and some people are skeptical of their market because it's not a regional jet. It can't scale up to be, 40, 50 passengers or anything. The battery chemistry is just not going to get them there. But there's a lot of reports. I've been reading a bunch about how private jet travel is just in. A lot of people who are on the fence, CEOs of small companies who are like, I just couldn't justify $10,000, to get here to there, or, $6,000 an hour or whatever. There's a lot of jet sharing and lots of different solutions where people are finding like, you know what, the cost kind of came down. There were a lot of trepidation because of the COVID and health scares, all this stuff. And I finally made the plunge and I'm not going back. It's been great. It saves me time. Time is money, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems like a good time for a 9-seater, better than probably any other time in history. So it seems like they've at least got that going for them, where 9 seats might be a pretty decent, like you said, just shooting from, Long Island to New York, or New York out into Boston, like something like that, where it's a short flight. Might make a lot of sense for 9 people who are willing to pay, $700, $800, $1,000 for that quick flight or more. I don't know what it would cost.
It has to be used quite often. I think the advantages here is that its operation costs are much lower than a typical turbofan engine. So the lower operating costs means to make your money here, because the airplane is still expensive, is you got to use it a lot. And shuttle service makes a lot of sense. Shared access, charter usage, totally the right place to go here. And you're right. I mean, there are certain parts of the United States and the world in which there's a lot of short jet flights, and they can be replaced by something that Eviation is building right now. It's all in a development, right? Eviation is not looking, it's got sort of 2 phases to it. There's this little short term, let's see if we can get out there, get something certified, and get out in the marketplace, get our name out. And then there's always a next phase. It's kind of like Honda, right? So Honda builds its first jet, then it improves upon it. Now it's got this bigger jet coming out. It's an evolution of products, but you have to be successful with the first one to get to the next stage, which is what Honda's been doing, right? And so Honda is kind of your model to work from. Watch what Honda does. Watch how they sell airplanes, and then develop the next airplane. It's going to make for a longer-term successful aircraft program.
So last on the list today is the Jaunt Journey. This is the slow rotor eVTOL that is definitely outside the box from all the other sort of mainstream, moving fast towards certification eVTOL prototypes. But they've partnered recently with Flapper, which is a private aviation company, kind of on demand in Latin America, which Latin America seems like definitely a big market for eVTOLs. As Alan and I have discussed, the security concerns of some places where you're flying, rooftop to rooftop, and a lot of the elites already kind of travel by helicopter in some of these countries. So, I mean, Alan, do you think the Jaunt Journey is on the right track? I mean, we kind of haven't heard from them much in the past 6 months.
I'm curious about the name Flapper. That's the first thing that stands out. I wouldn't necessarily. I don't know if that's just a translation issue. That in English it means like flapping your. Flapping is something a bird does. So it evokes of not a safe aircraft to me.
Panic. You're flapping. You're flapping hard to not. Right. Flapping is not soaring.
Right. Right. So there must be a translation issues. But Jaunt has been trying to find a marketplace for that aircraft for a little while. And I feel like they're slowly losing ground, unfortunately, because they're competing against the Jobies of the world. Right. And even if Jaunt has a better theoretical design, it's not really even theoretical because I think there's been sort of earlier prototypes by some of the companies they've acquired over time. The question is really a business one: is can you get the aircraft certified, developed out in the marketplace before everybody else floods it? I don't think so. Right now, I don't think so. You remember that they talked about moving the production of Jaunt up to Canada, and I think that kind of made sense because they got tax credits to be in Canada, and Canada is trying to promote those industries. But you really haven't seen anything. There's not a prototype flying. Everything right now is still a computer model. Still cool, but the computer model, when you're looking at Archer having a prototype, Joby's been flying for a while, Wisk's been flying for a while, Eviation's going to do first flight. You feel like they're losing ground, not technology-wise, but just business-wise. And that's the frustrating part, because you'd like to have, in an ideal engineering world, you'd like to have different ideas or different products competing for the same space and let it suss itself out, figure out which one's the best for those marketplaces. And I don't think we're going to do that, unfortunately. And it really comes down to investment money. Who's putting cash into Jaunt right now? And can they find somebody to write a $500 million check? I don't know. I don't know who that would be right now. And hopefully Jaunt can show us some things here in the next couple of months. But if not, Joby's going to really be putting the gas down on that aircraft and showing it flying over the Golden Gate Bridge and doing all the cool stuff that Joby's going to do. And same thing for Beta. Beta's going to get a bunch of pictures of the airplane flying and have a bunch of cool things going on. And Jaunt's going to hopefully show us a prototype. That would be great.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Struck. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, and leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again. We will see you next week on Struck.
Strike Tape, WeatherGuard Lightning Tech's proprietary lightning protection for radomes, provides unmatched durability for years to come. If you need help with your radome lightning protection, reach out to us at weatherguardaero.com. That's weatherguardaero.com.